is the Ridiculously Amazing Insurance Agent Podcast, hosted by me, Kelly Donahue Piro. This show is for growing insurance agencies looking to maximize their biggest investment, their people. Listen to the top agency performance partners clients share their story on how they boosted their performance by executing a plan. Let's head to the show. Hi, everyone. I am so excited about this podcast because as we launched our online school a year ago, I had a lot of trepidation about it actually, because I wasn't sure what the results would be if I wasn't personally involved. And I feel like this is my reputation. So now that we're a year in and we're hearing the stories from clients, I just couldn't be more excited about the online school. In particular, I want you to meet Dustin Burgess from Burgess Insurance. His whole team went through our renewal review call program, time management, sales training, but in particular, he's focusing in on the renewal review calls because he launched this right during COVID. So when we started, he bought the seats and went for it. And I think his story is really telling about what you can do with a good plan, some infrastructure, and a few video trainings. So I'll let Dustin tell the story. Without further ado, let's hop on into that podcast. Hi, everyone. Kelly Donahue Piro here for the Ridiculously Amazing Agent Podcast. As you know, this podcast is dedicated to growing agencies that have staff, that have processes, all the things that get to work on when you're managing 10 plus people. And so I'm so grateful here today to have Dustin Burgess. And I'm going to let him do the honors of introducing himself and his agency. So Dustin, would you like to tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and your agency?
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me today. As Kelly said, Dustin Burgess, president of the Burgess Group. We're in Northeast Ohio. We have locations in Alliance and Akron. We service Northeast Ohio, Florida, West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. We have a remote employee in Florida. So we always talk about the weather down there in Florida. So that's always a great time. But we have clients in various different industries. We work on some condominium associations. Most folks will probably know our area is in Canton. So if you're a football player or follow football, I should say, we're near the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get into insurance? Because I like to say insurance handpicks us. Probably didn't grow up thinking, I want to be an insurance agent, unless you did, and tell us your story.
No, I didn't. I was at college, Marshall University, so go Herd, and was recruited for the financial services industry. So I worked in the financial services industry for about 3 years, investments, financial planning, and then some Medicare products as well. And so that took me all over the country with that. Then Nationwide Insurance was having a vast round of retirements. And so I was approached by someone and asked if I'd be interested in purchasing a Nationwide agency. I thought it was going to be in Huntington, maybe where I was from. That didn't happen. It led me to Alliance in Canton, where I knew no one and just, took it on a leap of faith and moved to Canton. So we were with Nationwide just about 10 years. We went independent ahead of Nationwide, fully going independent. So that's had some challenges. It's also been a great learning experience. I'm happy where we're at this point, but we certainly had our road bumps there as well.
So tell us, I always think, if I recall, you did a little bit in life insurance before too, right? And I think that's just like the best sales training you can ever get, is selling life insurance as a newbie in insurance.
Yes. We we would have our call days, where we had lead lists and various different things. Sometimes we would get referrals. But when you're starting out, you just have to learn the script, what to say on the phone, when to say it, how to book the appointment. We actually made appointments at people's houses. So we went to people's houses. So it was nothing to spend, 8, 10, 12 hours a day out in the field working on some cases. We would have some no-shows, of course. You could hear them in the door or from the door. Oh, don't answer the door. Be quiet. They're here.
The life insurance guy is here.
Yeah. So, we had to learn persistence, and it also had to, they helped us learn rejection and how to handle that. So it was good. We sold a lot of life insurance and annuities, investments, things like that. So I have to say that I don't think we would have been in the place that we are had I not had some of that training in advance. Nationwide offered some fantastic training for the PNC world, but I definitely would not have been as prepared had I not had that prior.
That's amazing. So we fast forward today, you left Nationwide early, and now tell us a little bit about how many team members you have, personal, commercial. Where is the Burgess agency today?
Yep. So we have 16 members plus myself. I will traditionally work on the investment side of things and some of the larger, more complex commercial cases. We have a dedicated farm team, a couple of folks on that, and then we have personal and commercial. Our remote employee used to be a corporate trainer for Nationwide, so she can really help us with some of our needs remotely. So she'll help us and support on that. Does great interaction with our clients. And so what we're trying to do through the transition is really hone down our customer experience. And so a lot of people are talking about that these days. But
Yes.
through this program with you, Kelly, it's really helped us identify some of our processes that really weren't simple. And so one of our fundamentals that we kicked off this morning's call with is simple. And so those are the things that we are trying to work on. So that's what we're really trying to push forward with is our fundamentals and continue to grow. So we're really growing our commercial side of our book of business, and we're growing our agriculture side of the book of business. It seems to be that the more specialized we become, the more success that we begin to have. We still write personal lines, don't get me wrong, but we've got that gorilla being beat every day for billions and billions of dollars. So we still write a fair amount of personal lines, but we've realized that the commercial and farm and financial side of the business are where people really are searching out more expertise advice.
I think that's pretty amazing. And so why I wanted you on the podcast, so we kind of talked about this a few weeks ago, was we launched our online school. It was right about a year ago right now. We used the pandemic, me not flying, to like put this accelerator on the online school. And you were one of the early adopters that came in. And, one of the hardest parts for me is I'm used to being so hands-on with our clients. And we did the online school, I had all these nervousness of how can we guarantee the outcomes? How do we know it's working? Like, I didn't want to just put it up there and be okay, hands off. So I had many panic attacks, many days. I could look at the login reports, like I'd snoop on people. But you were one of the early ones. And so it was so cool to connect with you and say, like, tell me how it really works, because I don't get to see it. And I know the content's there. I know the content's the same stuff I use in person, but tell me a little bit about, you saw this opportunity come up and you're like, listen, it's a pandemic. Everybody's freaking out. I'm going to make my team do training. And on top of it all, I'm going to start them doing renewal review calls during a pandemic. Tell me your logic behind that.
Well, as some of my team would say, a little bit of crazy came along with that. But what I saw, honing back to my days back at Marshall, is I got an economics degree, so I always tried to do long-term planning. I was never the short-term plan guy. Talk to my professors in microeconomics, but I was always the macro guy. So I always tried to plan ahead and how do we think a couple of steps ahead so that we're in a position of strength or a position of power. And so I was referred to you. I watched your podcasts and listened to them, and we'd met some conference. So one of the folks that are taking your program said, "Hey, Dustin, you really need to check this out." So of course it happened, right? You stopped flying at that time, and we can't see anybody. So we had to come up with a different alternative. And so I think that the class really came along at the right time, something that we could institute ourselves, maybe a more scaled down version. Instead of having a day or two shut down or whatever, for you to come out, although we would have loved that. But it was hard at the beginning. I'll be honest with you. We had some processes for renewals, but it was not a very consistent process. And so having it laid out in the workbook and having some scripting and some plans to really follow, that was probably the biggest key for us, was being able to have that kind of tracker and tips on how to do it in the management system. You put us in connection with Sue Good, who
One of
helped
my
us.
favorite people.
Well, she really was fantastic and very knowledgeable in applied. So not only did it help fix our renewal kind of issue, if you will, Sue also helped us set up our new management system with some tips on that. And so she was very helpful in showing us some things that we didn't know were broken, and gave us some guidances there. So if I hadn't had this class, I would have probably not met Sue and been able to have worked with her. So I'm thankful for the class and for that opportunity.
I'm thankful Sue could get us into her schedule to help us with it, because I just think the world of Sue. If those of you don't know, it's Sue Good. She's an Epic trainer with Alexan. And if anybody is listening to our podcast, if you go back a few months, we actually interviewed her and she went through all these different hacks in Epic that you can use. So I really recommend, if you're on Epic, taking a look at that. But Sue actually designed our entire course inside of our school for how do you make renewal review calls on Epic. So if the management system's a hang up, we kind of have that problem solved in the school, I think, which is kind of what Dustin's leaning on right now. So you make the decision, we're going to do this. Tell us how you told the team, because this is always one of those ones where I get super excited to tell the team. I'm like, we gotta hand orchestrate this, because some people are going to want to like puke in a trash bag, and some people are gonna be like, what? We don't have time. And I think in our heads, always the worst is gonna happen, because most staff members talk about how little time they have now. So now we're gonna layer on this big thing. So what did you do to tell your team?
So I thought about all of those things. So I thought about, let's have the trash can ready. My staff are going to revolt. They're going to tell me they don't have time to do it. We didn't need the trash can. All of them are still here and we've hired since. So thankful for that. But I know that they probably thought I was crazy, because there was so much uncertainty with COVID-19. They didn't know. And quite frankly, I didn't know. But I had to go on the fact of, we have to do what's best for our clients, put our clients' best interests first. And if we're not always meeting those interests and those needs, we need to go back to the drawing board and get better prepared.
Mhm.
We would talk to our clients, we talk to them pretty frequently, but not necessarily in the process or the way that you have outlined from the class. And so some of the things that are just as simple as getting the cell phone or the email or getting them opted in, we weren't always doing. So that really helped us tremendously. But we had a video meeting, so we were fortunate and had become more a little farther ahead than maybe some at the time. But we had Microsoft Teams and we could communicate via video and chat. So we had a staff meeting. I announced what the plan and the process was going to be. In the book, it kind of outlines a little launch party, which we kind of talked about that and did it. I took a little further because we couldn't physically be together. So it is a little different than you coming out and being in the agency, or even just myself being with the staff and being able to explain the process and procedure. So I'm shipping books to their houses saying, hey, come to the office and get this. And so they're like, oh my gosh, what is this book? And we explain the process. And I'm going to tell you, they were scared at the beginning.
What do you think some of their fears were? Was it time? Was it everyone's going to want to talk about rate? Was it?
All the above. One, we don't have time for it. Why are we doing this? This is new. Just, I wanted to really try and make sure that they understood why we were doing this.
Sure.
So when we talk about the why behind the why, it really makes a lot more sense of how a small group of folks can achieve some of the success that we've achieved. Is I think that it is from communication, so that they know the why behind the why. So we did that and we talked about it. And, I have to say about my team, they really just get behind whatever I ask them to do. Not that they didn't have a little bit of trepidation, but they got behind it. They're like, okay, we're kind of gonna do this, right? And so I really do think that the Tigger and the Eeyore approach is true. And so basically, we just had to say we're not going to be the Eeyore. We have to be the Tigger, and we have to have that energy and keep moving along. And for the first 3 or 4 weeks, it was interesting. So we'll say that it was interesting. So we have a Monday morning call, and so we would talk about our calls every Monday. Share your numbers, cross sells, upsells, and again, we were trying to figure out how we put it in the agency management system, what's reporting, what's not reporting, those kind of things. So it definitely was a learning curve together. And we learned that we needed to make some tweaks on our management system as we did that. So overall, I think that they like it. They were not filling out a form, if you will, consistently. And so now putting that in place and where they do it every time now really makes that phone call a 5 or 10 minute phone call versus a 30-minute phone call when you're quote unquote preparing during the call.
It's interesting you say that because we work with a lot of nationwide agencies that have made that transition to independent. And a lot of them have in their head that a whole, oh, this is a nationwide on your side review, which it has a lot of similarities. But from what I understand, a lot of those were like in person. Like you said, they were preparing on the call with people and they ended up being like hour plus long scenarios and really going into like annuities and life insurance and all of the things. And
Yes.
if you don't mind sharing, like, where do you see the difference? Just because you'll know a little bit more maybe about the nationwide side on your review than I do. Like, where are the differences for nationwide agencies listening?
Well, the On Your Side review was really the first thing that I won't say the first thing Nationwide came out with, but they came out with this program and it was an On Your Side experience. And so they tried to curate an experience where they could be somewhat simple, repeatable, and inspectable across the board. And it really is part of this process. But I think on the On Your Side, we were so focused at only talking about, the product, or things that Nationwide really had us moving towards. And so, whether it was identity theft or, uh, you know, service line coverage or whatever the new item was to come out, those were the things that we were tending to talk about because that's what was being sent to us from our management. And God bless them for doing it because they wanted to make sure that we were talking about those things. But I would say with this program, I really think it's a little more simplistic for us to use and follow. It's not an hour long phone call or in-person meeting. It's 5 to 10 minutes of prep time now, maybe less, now that my staff are doing it pretty regularly. And it's a maybe 10-minute, 15-minute phone call if we're talking to them. We're all prepared. And what I really like about it is filling out the form, we can put it in their account. So if the advisor that called them initially is not available, they can pull open the document, look at it, and be just as prepared as the other advisor was.
Sure.
So that has really been a big help for us. Of course, always trying to get the folks back to call us back, email us back, or things like that. So that's probably still our biggest struggle, is just getting the return phone calls as we're reaching out in our various methods.
Well, and we've seen different peaks and valleys during COVID. It's kind of like when everyone went home, everyone picked up their phone call, like a person to talk to. That's not my spouse. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Let's talk about insurance. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it kind of went away as summer hit and people went a little bit back, and then it kind of went back in the fall. And so we do see some peaks and valleys to the callback, especially at the time frame that you launched. It was just very unique times, as I'm
Yeah.
sure your team
And we
experienced.
talked to a lot of people at the beginning.
Mhm.
Right at the very beginning when the staff were starting the process, I would say we just kind of did more of a welfare check. They started the process and trying to begin to fill out the form, and as they got more comfortable with it, they started preparing and asking the questions. But really at the beginning is, hey, how are you doing? Do you need anything? We chopped off a little bit of food from time to time. Some folks couldn't get out, or they needed water, or whatever it was. Not to toot our own horn, but um, again, that's just the beauty of living in the communities that you work in. When somebody says, I'm out of milk and I can't get any, um, you know, so it was a good time for us to do this. And I think it boded well for our agency, as we start to talk about more referrals in that process, because you just can't beat somebody saying, you'll never believe that my insurance agent or showed up to the house with a bag of groceries, or they brought me whatever.
Yeah.
Just makes the difference. So I think that helped us as well.
Just also goes to show like how people were really in need during that time. Like, to think, hey, I don't have water or milk, and like that their insurance agent can help deliver that. That's just very heartwarming. And I think it's one of the reasons we exist is in that we're still here is because we can have that very intimate pulse on the community. So you had kind of indicated the first 3 or 4 weeks were choppy. I kind of equate this like an airplane taking off, right? Like kind of getting out the door and getting out the gates, kind of choppy. And then you're always waiting for like the pilot to be on, we're going to be on the runway for the next 2 hours. It's like everyone's making their final text messages and phone calls. And then you're right, about 3 or 4 weeks happen and kind of like the plane's up in the sky, but it's still a little choppy, right? Like people are still trying to figure it out, how to get it in.
Yeah.
How long do you think it was like, hey, till the plane's up in the sky, smooth sailing and everyone can have a cocktail? How long do you think that took you guys?
So the first 2 weeks, just trying to continue to talk about it, not trying to really force it at that point, because again, we're separated. We're trying to figure out how to set up our phones. We're
Sure.
trying to make sure that we answer our phone calls, and the phone rang a lot. I mean, it really did. It rang a lot. So I would say that the first 2 weeks were probably the roughest, just as far as the launch and trying to integrate it. But I would say about the fifth or the sixth week, I would say we were really up in the air, up and running. I just noticed from their conversations, where they're talking about, they upsold, from rental car coverage. You don't think about it anymore, but rental car coverage, if you get in an accident, $20 or $30 a day is really not much anymore. Or especially if you have a big pickup truck or a large SUV, just having those small conversations and getting to know them, asking those questions, what do you want to accomplish out of the call today? Um, Really helps. So I would say about the fifth or the sixth week, we were up and running. We did have cocktail hour, a few times, as we like to call it, maybe beer 30.
Nice.
We had some virtual happy hours, and it was just real nice being able to chill for a few minutes, talk about some of the success. And at that time, some of the spouses were there too, so they joined with us.
Oh, that's fun. That's very fun. Hey everyone, what a great podcast you're listening to with Dustin Burgess. If you're interested in our online school, let us know. It's called the Agency Performance Pack, and it's got time management, sales, renewal reviews, how to reduce remarketing, how to convert every inbound call into some form of opportunity, and launching July 15th will be cross-selling. And we include cross-selling life, cross-selling business to personal lines, and vice versa. And also, if you're working the real estate leads, we've got a whole section in there on how to get that auto after you get a home buyer. So awesome course. Can't wait to do it. Think about all these great things you're hearing from Dustin about what his team did. So if you're interested, you can go to agencyperformancepartners.com, look at the shop button and look for the Agency Performance Pack. Can't go wrong. Any questions, let us know. We'd be happy to help you. But let's get back to Dustin. So tell us, like, now you're making these renewal calls, and there's always people who think they can't be done, like it's impossible. There's people who think it leads to all this extra reshopping of the accounts because you're poking the sleeping bear. I'd love for you to maybe share like the 3 biggest successes you've seen by making the calls. And then, if there were any low points, a lot of agencies will go through and be like, we had a lot of missing coverages, or we had especially if you bought a book of business over time, scrubbing those accounts can be a little challenging. So I'd love to hear your 3 high points and your 3 struggles that, if you were giving any agency owner some advice, what they should look for.
Yeah. So some of our, I guess would say struggles, but would also be a success, is as people wanted to be talked to. I mean, they wanted to talk to us. We wanted to talk to them. I would say probably more so than any other time period before. And so where we were always so fast, let's just get this done as quickly as we can, people were a little more receptive to our phone calls because they wanted to talk to somebody. And you're right, other than their husband or their wife or children, they wanted to have an adult conversation.
About insurance.
Yeah, right. About something other than what time do I go down for a nap and what are we cooking for dinner, all of those kind of things. But a couple of the things that we saw was during the transition, some billing changes happened from our past companies. And so some things were not always correct. And so I would say that we saw some of our biggest changes or our biggest successes where there wasn't an issue that the client called in and asked for. We found it going through the review and said, oh, by the way, did you know your second home, the insurance is canceled on that for 1.5 years? What? So they got the notifications, we called them, we emailed them, we mailed them. And just because we were doing that review again, we had a decent process, but not a very consistent process with renewals. So we called and talked to them. And I mean, we really didn't receive any pushback of, I can't believe this, it was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you took the time to look at that. And now you're fixing it. So it was
easy phone calls to make, right? Like, hey, by the way, your second home has no insurance.
and we're noticing that preparing for the review.
Right.
So I definitely think that the process has everyone looking farther into the account, just as we've transitioned. So we may spend a couple of more minutes than an established agency with quite a few carriers that have a decent sized book of business, where more ours are probably tied into 2 or 3 of our larger carriers, being nationwide with a line leader at this point. So there was a lot of fixing on our part of just trying to get the customer service. So I would say that's some wins, and that's also some struggles in there as well. Our staff, I've mentioned the rental car coverage, and not 2 weeks later, somebody had an accident, needed it, paid for it. They were just ecstatic. It was kind of those ones where you wanted to say, I told you so, but we didn't. They were like, oh, we're so happy that we can get that handled. Everybody on this podcast are going to have those, oh my gosh moments, or I told you moment. So I would say overall, it's been a very positive thing. A couple of things we noticed that we were missing some documents that we should have had as we're reviewing the account. So I would say that that was on us for sure in the low moments, which helped us with our processes for that too.
Yeah, we like to call the renewal review calls like penicillin. It kind of cures alike. You can get email addresses and cell phones and make sure you have signed apps and scrub those accounts for the coverage that got dropped and look
Yeah.
for those cross sells. Like it covers everything. And that's why it's such a powerful program. Albeit a couple weeks to get up and running and a little choppy to start, but then it kind of calms down a little bit. So everyone has told me, and you shared this with me too, that there's one thing about Dustin Burgess is that he tracks everything. I hear that there's never an Excel spreadsheet far from you.
No, not too far away. But I really look at things and I guess it's just from, the schooling and training and things like that. I'm always trying to predict where we need to be and what we need to work on. So, from a CEO approach of 35,000 feet, but then I also say we have to be down to 3.5 feet as well. So you work on it and then you have to work in it. But when we talk about our numbers, I mean, thanks for saying that. I'm sure some of my colleagues and my staff and some of our carrier partners really get tired of me talking about our numbers with them. And in a lot of cases, it's sometimes it's an agency issue. In some cases, it's a carrier issue. And that's not always like to be expressed, but we track the numbers. I have someone who goes in every morning and assigns the Apex calls every day. I'm sure some of the folks on the podcast will be wondering how many are you doing every day? Some days we might have 5. Some days we might have 13 or 15 per associate. So it really just ranges for us. And with the program, it started to help us learn where our ebbs and our flows are. So we know where we really need to make sure everybody's here, no vacations this week, hence Thanksgiving, one of our largest renewal times. So it's always our gift if we can get off on Thursday and be off on Friday, because we have such a big flow that time of year.
I think that's we always say, because as you know, we do a lot of time management training too. People grow to the size of their fishbowl. Like, you never work harder than when before you go on vacation, you're like banging through stuff, you're doing calls to action. You're like, Dustin, I need this because I'm going on vacation.
Right.
I work differently than normal. And I'm just like, think of every Saturday and Sunday as a vacation. You just gotta put the hustle in during the week.
And we did your time management. I mean, we went through all of the courses that were available. I really think that having the culmination of all of them helped us with the Apex.
Sure.
Because I think maybe the precursor for us was doing the time management and then do the Apex for our agency. It really helped us have some discussions that were maybe a little uncomfortable. But we could kick it back to Kelly and say, well, Kelly's class tells us we need to talk about this, right? So we were able to really examine some things and look at them a little more in depth of how we should and shouldn't do it. We're not perfect. I don't want to sit here and sound like we are, but we are improving for sure. So definitely from this program, we've improved dramatically from staff just being happy that they're able to connect and meet people, but also from our retention as well.
So would you mind sharing the numbers with our listeners if you have them handy?
So specifically regarding
whichever numbers come into your head, as far as, usually we track retention, increases, cross sells.
So, the biggest one that I was looking for is, let's face it, if retention increases, that's how much is not going out my door that I've got to try and replace just to stay equal. And then I have to write more to show a growth. So if you've got 10% natural attrition, you've got to replace 10% plus grow. to see some growth. So we saw a little bit of loss right at the beginning of COVID, which is probably what kicked in this program where I'm like, okay, we've got to focus on COVID and our retention. And so our retention at the beginning kind of trickled up about 0.2% the first month and a half, which, hey, increased retention for any owner it's always good. But I really don't think you're far off when you say it could average somewhere between 2 and 3%. Since our past phone call, we're at 3.11% retention. So we're happy about that. So we've actually crest the 3% mark.
Good for you.
So we're really, really working on that. With some tips from your remarketing, we have had to do a little bit of that, but not a ton. So I'm happy about that. I'm just trying to recall all of the numbers.
I
But
just want to stop on the 3%, or I know it was more, but 3 got stuck in my brain because I stopped listening after you dropped the 3 bomb. Just to put that in perspective for people, what that means is if he was at 90% retention in 1 year, because it's probably been about a year, is that pretty safe to say at this point? In 1 year, increased from say 90% to 93%, which is a dramatic bump of being able to that's a dramatic number that I just want to make sure everybody understood, that it wasn't just, oh, we went up a little bit. Like, that's a big number right there, and you should be really proud of it, and tell your staff I said congratulations for sure.
Certainly will. Thank you. It comes from the program and their hard work. So I like to say it's a mix of what you've put together and, their blood, sweat, and tears that they've put into it, because they're the ones doing the calls. I talk to the clients that I need to talk to, that I handle, but they're the ones doing 98, 99% of the calls. And so they're seeing those successes. They're seeing the upsells and cross sells. We've had over 900 cross sells on there. We've had just short of 1,000 upsells, and we're tracking everything. So that's as you bump somebody from a $30 to a $40 rental car adjustment. That's just a one tick for us. So we've seen some increases. We're excited about that. We traditionally had a pretty high retention rate. But when you can start being in the mid 90s in retention, that certainly sets you up in a carrier's perspective. They're looking and saying, okay, well, what are you doing? Or if you need some help on something, the increased retention, what we've experienced is the carrier is willing to maybe have a little more conversation with you because you really are showing that you support that. I mean, we love our carriers, don't get me wrong, but we want to make sure we do what's best for the client and keep them to the agency, because they are who pay our salaries.
So it's super interesting you said that, because just this past week we had 2 carrier issues that came up, and I think you'll kind of laugh at this. One, the carrier put a halt on them being able to improve coverage without underwriter approval because they were improving coverage too much. And they flagged it as like, was it fraudulent? Is the client really doing this? And the agency owner just stopped and say, no, we're calling every client. Part of our process is improving coverage. And then they took it off, but it got flagged as like, suspicious activity basically by the carrier. And then the other one got a phone call from a carrier saying, you're in jeopardy. You're not quoting us as much. And they said, that's because our remarketing has dropped by like 80%. And that's why you're not seeing the same number of quotes, because we're trying to defend your book of business. And then they were like, okay, we're good with that. We're good with, we can keep on that. But it's funny how sometimes the carriers maybe look at things like this more negatively than trying to understand, well, what's going on.
Sure. I think you're exactly right, because the only carrier that I didn't call and let them know what we were doing is the only carrier I got a phone call from that says, what the heck? Your quoting activity's gone down like 95%. What's going on? And while we also did a little bit of self-evaluation of the type of business that we wanted to work with during this time, we really liked talking to nice people.
Go
Uh,
figure.
Go figure, right? We like talking to nice people. So we kind of started to talk about, you know, the way that people do business with us
Mm,
and let them know about that. And if we don't think that they're going to fit, we're still going to offer them the opportunity to do business with us. But sometimes they'll self-select themselves out.
sure. You don't have to remarket people who are upset. You can let them go and it's okay.
And I made the decision on a few of those. I usually don't get involved too much with the client when they're upset with the associate. Um, there's a difference between being upset at the situation.
Mhm.
Hey, my bill went up $100. I'm upset. They might even say this is BS or something like that. They're upset at the situation, in my opinion. When they cross that line to they're now upset at the associate, um, that's where we draw the line.
Sure. Sure.
So they're never going to have to take that or accept that. And COVID brought out some of folks' great qualities, and it also brought out some very difficult um, situations,
Sure.
or maybe some difficult personalities. And so we tried to chalk that up just as the time. But, when we have that next interaction and it's like that again, we still want to give them a great experience. But, if we're not meeting their needs, um, we kind of let them know now if we're not meeting your needs, we understand if you have to go somewhere else.
Absolutely. So I do have one more question for you because this is one of those things in the program that's hard to measure, but we hear consistently. And I'm curious if this happened to you. And I think it's probably one of the biggest components that I wish I could put a metric on, but universally, pretty much, we hear that the staff just feels so much more confident and that they're able to have conversations, control conversations. The shyness maybe about asking for a cross sell kind of goes away. They get much stronger at some of the core skills I think every agency owner wants their team to get, but maybe there's not a clear pathway. Did you see a difference in your team's confidence level at all?
I did. So I have a range of, uh, I won't mark anybody's age or anything, but we're talking probably 20 plus years of experience, versus, somebody that's got less than, you know, 5 or 10
Sure.
experience. I'm trying not to mark my staff. That way, if you got to my website or see somebody, it won't, oh my gosh, when are you getting ready to retire, or when are you going to quit? No, sorry. But what I noticed is the conversation that they're having is more prepared and well defined. So instead of just the talk just to talk, the
Mhm.
fill. They're actually talking about the insurance. The clients know that we're going to be calling them every year to discuss these items, and they know it's not going to be a 1 or 2 hour process
Sure.
as it was before. So I think they felt better. I think they felt better just being able to see some small wins. Just I keep mentioning the rental. That just seems to be something that everybody really relates to, is renting a car in the event of an accident. um it was like $1. I think it was $1
Really
6 months or something.
expensive.
Yeah, nothing. It's not nothing, but very minuscule. um so the staff are enjoying those small wins, which I think helps create larger wins, so that when they are asking for the bigger things, or they're trying to explain a policy that maybe they feel is a little too much, they can explain it in more of a position of strength or position of power, versus, oh my gosh, they're not going to buy this. This is so much. They're prepared for the call.
Yeah. No, that's a very valuable point, and I I love hearing the increases, actually top secretly, sometimes more than the cross sells. I know the cross sells make the agency way more money and it's going to secure retention, but I was like saying, hey, it's not about price. They just paid
Right.
more for their insurance. And
Right.
it keeps squashing that false belief that people only call about price, because when you're not making the renewal calls, what people don't understand is what's calling in at you either has a question or a complaint. That's
Right.
it. When you start diving into your book, you realize we haven't talked to this person in 10 years
Oh my
and
gosh. Yes.
taken the rate, never needed anything. And they're
Right.
the agency's most profitable client. And we're stuck with the person who can't pay their bills up here, talking to them every month. And we got this guy
Multiple
here.
times a month, multiple times a month. I
Mhm.
mean, this program, I should say this program and the time management program, as we talk about that, and then the remarketing, we looked at that, and I think we've really decided that we can't spend that amount of time on those very low revenue generators. So we just made the process. Again, it took us, almost a year to fully figure some of it out. We're not all the way there, but we're no longer making those outbound billing calls. They're going to either be done via email or text message. We may send some text messages from our agency, or they're going to be opted in through the carrier. We're no longer their personal assistant.
Correct. And if they walk, they're burning the agency's money, and we can't get to those good people that have, the home, auto, umbrella, life packages because
Yes.
we're over servicing these undesirable customers,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Our quote volume, so I will say an interesting thing is our quote volume went down overall, but our premium increase has gone up significantly, and our quote to bind ratio has gone up somewhere but close to 50%.
Whoa, that's big.
So what we've realized is if we get the referral or the type of business that we're really wanting to go after, we've got a great carrier mix here in the agency, and we've got a pretty good position for them. So if the carriers that we have now don't want them, we have to sit back and think about it for a moment. Are
Right.
they really the best for the agency? Now we've got a non-standard carrier or whatever that will still take them.
That's
Uh,
friends and family now.
yeah, yeah. But we've really seen some increase in that. So our premium volume by quote has gone up probably about a third, 33 to 34% as far as greater premium, because we are getting greater accounts, home, auto, umbrella, or toys. We're working on those referrals, and we've pointed out through the program, these are the things we're trying to accomplish via the call, and they're always in front of us. And with that sheet, we know that these are the things that we need to talk about. And so I can't say enough great things about the program. I think the only thing that I would have done differently is have you in the agency. Not that the online program's not great. I think it would have just been, an even better experience having you in the agency as well.
Well, maybe we can make that happen in the future. But I really appreciate all the guidance and nuggets you gave to people, because I think there's some trepidation, even just on the online side. And, you know, some agencies maybe aren't in the position to afford kind of the more advanced program. And I just want to conclude this podcast with this. Our next course is going to be all on cross selling, and there will be a huge section on cross selling life. And that was your big recommendation. So we're going to have a whole lesson just on, it's going to be kind of a couple modules actually, just on the life side, because I'm super passionate about that. And it's my favorite sale. Umbrella and life are my favorite sale. So I'm looking forward to making that live in July.
Well, and think about this as that little nugget. I mean, life insurance is a financially lucrative opportunity within the agency and for your staff.
Mhm.
So I really think that will be a phenomenal thing, and we will be together, I'm sure, soon. Uh, but yeah, this has been a great thing for us, and I can't say enough. And if folks have questions, Kelly, they're welcome to reach
I
out.
appreciate that. Just so everyone knows too, we will be in that same section, will be one on how to cross sell if you're doing a lot of lender and realtor leads as well. So you're getting that home, but you got to get that trailing auto, which isn't always easy when people are moving and all that stuff. So that's coming soon too. So watch, it'll launch on July 15th. This podcast will launch about a week before that. So just so everybody's listening, but Dustin, I can't thank you enough for sharing so much knowledge with our group. And thank you for allowing me video wise into your team and taking a chance on us too. Or it's probably like, what is all this? But we're going to figure it out. So I just appreciate you so very much. And thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's been a pleasure to join you today.
All right. Take care, everybody. So everybody, what did you think about the podcast with Dustin? Wasn't that an amazing story? 3 percentage points increase in retention in 1 year. People would kill for that. Do you know what that changes in an agency dramatically? Just do your revenue and then imagine that you're going to keep 3% more of that. Yes, who doesn't want that? The mid-90s retention is the holy grail. And just by taking our online courses and the hard work of his team, he was able to get there. So if you have any questions on our online school, reach out to us. But just remember, we don't do any sponsors for this podcast. You don't hear any advertisements. You just hear us talking about what we do for agencies. So if you like it, make sure to like it on the podcast platform you listen to. Share it with other people. Leave a comment, leave a review. We'd love to hear from you. And that's what we have today. So watch out for our new course launching on July 15th. And we can't wait to see you there. Take care, everybody.